Minister, the UN Environment Programme was very clear that the bare minimum emissions reduction we need to avoid catastrophic climate change is 7.6% a year. In reality, as a developed country, Ireland should be aiming for much more than that. The proposed programme for government is full of fluff on climate change, but it is empty of binding commitments to tackle this crisis in the next 5 years. As Extinction Rebellion have said today, it is simply not good enough, and it should be rejected. On the core issue of reducing emissions, the deal actually contains no commitments in terms of reductions in the lifetime of the government for which it's a programme. Instead, there's a commitment to an average of 7% reductions over the course of the next decade. But in terms of what will happen in the next 5 years, i.e. the next government, the Taoiseach yesterday made it clear that not much will change. Instead, he said, quote, "Most of the reductions will happen in the second 5-year term." So the Greens are being asked to sign up to 5 years of inaction and austerity on the promise that the next government will tackle climate change. That's a bad deal for the planet, it's a bad deal for workers, and it's a deal which hopefully Grassroots Greens will reject. The proposed programme for government lets agribusiness, the #1 emitting sector in Ireland, completely off the hook. The devil is in the detail in the sentence talking about recognising the special role of agriculture and the distinct characteristics of biogenic methane. From listening to Minister Creed's inability to explain the sentence, never mind the science behind the sentence, on RTE Radio this morning, it is clear that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are using this as a means to create a carve-out for agribusiness. It potentially means no reductions whatsoever targeted for the #1 biggest emitting sector in Ireland. The truth is that methane is methane. Its special role is to be a particularly damaging greenhouse gas. It doesn't stay in the atmosphere as long as CO2, but it traps heat at 84 times the rate of CO2. Again, to quote Professor Sweeney, there is unlikely to be any scenario whereby, without an absolute reduction in Irish methane emissions, the end product will be compatible with the 7% target. The proposed programme for government is a trap being laid for the Greens, and it should be rejected by their grassroots membership. It's an attempt by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to lure the Greens into propping up their rule for another 5 years with empty promises that they really will change this time, that in the 5 years after the government is finished, well then actually they'll get to the business of serious climate action. Grassroots Greens and others should read the deal for themselves. There are 127 reviews promised. There are 68 things to be examined, and they pledge to consider 44 promises and establish 12 commissions. These are classic tactics from the political establishment to kick the can down the road, to achieve the pretense of doing something by setting up more talking shops. But the science is clear. Now is the time for action on climate change. Grassroots Greens are being patronised by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and many political commentators. They're being told to tone down their expectations on climate action. But we have heard all of this before. When it came to repeal, the political establishment and the media told pro-choice activists that we were being too radical in calling for free, safe and legal abortion in Ireland. We were told to compromise and water down our principles. But we refused, we built a movement, and we won as a result. So I encourage the Grassroots Greens, don't be bullied, don't be conned, follow the science and face the truth. The truth is that this is a bad deal which should be rejected. There's an alternative based on joining with the left to build social movements for climate justice, housing justice, social justice, and in doing so, win victories today and prepare the way for a left government with an eco-socialist programme in the future.
Thank you, Deputy.